Let's catch up with Susie O'Brien from the Herald Sun in Melbourne and Radio 2CC breakfast host Stephen Cenatiempo in the nation's capital. Good to talk to you both again. We're so used to all these protests at the moment. Of course, it's the Palestinian protests happening every week in Melbourne and Sydney pretty much. Chris Minns, the Labor Premier of New South Wales, Susie, seems to have had enough. He reckons it's costing too much. Has he got a fair point?
Well, he was saying that the cost since January of these protests is something like $5 million worth of police time and presence. And you've got to say that if he did manage to put an end or restrict some of these protests, it would be a very popular move. The 94% of people on one online poll said, yes, let's do it. And of course, some people would say, and I would agree with it, that this kind of policing cost is just the cost of doing business in a democracy. You have to allow people to protest, but when you've got the same groups doing it week after week after week, maybe that's time to put some restrictions around it.
Yeah, and it's about where they go and what sort of protest it is. They could just stand outside Parliament with placards and cause nobody any trouble rather than marching down the streets. Here's a bit of what Chris Minns had to say.
I want the police in a position to be able to, if they feel they don't have the resources, deny an application for a march through Sydney because they've got other jobs to do in one of the busiest and complex cities in the world.
Yeah, Stephen, I think it's such a sensible point. I mean, not stopping protests, but when you have to shut down the city for them, we all pay for it. And there's police we'd like to have patrolling our suburbs or other hotspots are busy doing this nonsense. And I seem to recall recently when we've had sort of right-wing popular figures who have been speaking at functions around the country, they've had to pay for the police to provide security at their events.
Yeah, and that's right. There's a couple of two issues here. Firstly, can we stop calling these protests pro-Palestine? They're not. They're pro-Hamas, pro-Hezbollah. So that in and itself is a problem. But I think Chris Minns has hit the nail on the head here. We have a massive shortage of police right across the country. We don't have the police resources to be handling these things on a week-in, week-out basis. And the distraction from other policing work is, I mean, a classic example is here in Canberra, we get these Extinction Rebellion idiots that glue themselves to the street or whatever. Every police officer that's got to go and deal with some muppet is not investigating crime, which is what we want our police out there doing, or preventing crime. They're looking after a bunch of morons who are largely ignorant and protesting something they don't actually understand in the first place and taking away those valuable resources. And if it's costing $5 million over a few months, I mean, that's money we just can't afford to spend.